The first blush of dawn on 7th of October 1571 painted the Gulf of Patras a muted rose, as though the heavens themselves offered a moment of fragile beauty before surrendering to iron and flame. To the east, the rugged hills of Aetolia were still purple with night, but upon the watery plain between Cape Scrofa and the mouth of the river Evenus, two great armadas strained like chained titans, eager to break free. Each flotilla bristled with lateen sails, triple-banked oars, and bronze-snouted guns, a floating forest of masts crowned by standards that caught the mounting breeze. Aboard more than 400 galleys, 35,000 sailors readied grappling hooks, swivel cannon, and jars of Greek fire, while 85,000 soldiers cleaned matchlocks, honed pikes, and steeled their souls with prayers to very different gods. On this thin ribbon of sea, the self-proclaimed invincible navy of the Ottoman Empire was about to collide with the newly forged Holy League. And whatever happened when oars bit water and the first cannons spoke would resound far beyond the Mediterranean's cerulean rim. For the first time in over a century, the Crescent and the Cross were massed for a decisive trial by arms. And before twilight, one fleet would lie in smoldering ruin, while the other exulted in a triumph sung for ages. Yet the clash at Lepanto, called Naupactos by ancient Greeks and Ayasuluk by the Ottomans, was not conjured overnight. Its taproot ran deep into the politics of empire and faith. Since the fall of Constantinople in 1453, successive sultans had pushed the Ottoman frontiers steadily westward, planting their green banners across the Balkans and along the ravaged shores of the Adriatic. Suleiman the Magnificent's artillery had once thundered at Vienna's gates. His corsairs, Barbarossa, Dragut, Uluç Ali, raided as far afield as the Balearics, seizing prizes and captives by the tens of thousands. Mediterranean Christendom, riven by Protestant revolt in the north and dynastic rivalries everywhere, seemed powerless to resist. Venice lost Cyprus after a heroic yet doomed defense at Famagusta. Malta barely survived the Great Siege of 1565, and even that respite felt temporary. When news arrived in Rome that Sultan Selim II, son of Suleiman, intended to subdue all Christian islands between Rhodes and Sicily, Pope Pius V, a spare Dominican monk with eyes of smoldering judgment, decided the hour for disunity had passed. He begged, exhorted, even threatened Europe's Catholic princes until two natural enemies, Philip II of Spain and the Republic of Venice, signed, with papal envoy Cardinal Granvelle, a treaty of Holy League in May 1571. Genoa sent its finest admiral, Andrea Doria. The Knights of St. John dispatched crack arquebusiers. Minor Italian duchies contributed powder and promise. Over this disparate host, the Pope placed his ultimate gamble. 24-year-old Don Juan of Austria, bastard half-brother to Philip and veteran of the Morisco Revolt. Young, charismatic, and hungry for glory, Don Juan vowed to offer the Ottomans battle on the sea they think their own. While Christian dockyards rang with the pounding of mallets and the rasp of saws, the Ottoman arsenal at Galata answered rhythm for rhythm. Grand Admiral Muezzinzadeh Ali Pasha, a former slave who had risen by courage and cunning, drew galleys from Constantinople, Rhodes, Chios, and Alexandria, forming a fleet not only massive, but experienced in amphibious war. Alongside him sailed Uluç Ali Reis, an Italian renegade baptized Giovanni Dionigi Galeni before captivity turned him Turk, whose seamanship commanded respect even from Genoese rivals. The venerable Pertev Pasha oversaw the right wing, nursing wounds from earlier campaigns, yet unwilling to cede command. Most oarsmen were Christian captives. Greeks, Albanians, Slavs chained 3 to a bench beneath the screaming coxswain's whip. Above decks, Sipahi horsemen grimaced at their strange maritime duty, while janissaries, elite infantry of the port, stacked matchlock racks beside brass culverins rumored capable of bowling a hole clean through oak from 200 paces. Confident in numbers, seasoned by victory from Crete to Corfu, Ali Pasha sailed west with green pennons aflutter, daring any foe to block his passage. Block him the Holy League would. By late September, Don Juan had concentrated 208 galleys and 6 galleasses at Messina. He ordered a solemn fast, then a mass under decks, whose canticles reverberated through hull planks into the sea beyond. On 29 September, the feast of St. Michael the Archangel, he raised a great blue banner sent by Pius V, embroidered with Christ crucified above crossed quays. Priests walked gangways, sprinkling decks with holy water. Soldiers knelt amid coils of rigging, repeating the rosary. On the prow of the flagship Real, a carved lion of St. Mark stared seaward in golden defiance. Crossing the Strait of Otranto under full sail, the Allied fleet hugged the Albanian coast, pausing at Corfu to water horses and gather intelligence from Greek fishermen who spoke in hushed tones of an Ottoman armada, anchored only 2 days' pull away. Scouts returned with tidings. The Sultan's host lay near Lepanto, swollen by fresh reinforcements from Modon. Don Juan grinned with a predator's calm. He convened a council aboard the Real, where 3 languages jostled among stern faces. Some Venetian nobles urged caution. They feared risking the Republic's last seaworthy galleys so soon after Cyprus, but the young commander overruled them. "Gentlemen, the time for council is past. Now we shall see who serves God." He set course southeast through the Ionian Islands, hugging Ithaca, then Cephalonia, until night of 6th October cloaked the fleet within striking range of the Gulf. At first light, the Christian vanguard emerged from the narrows into open water, rowers straining in disciplined unison. Surface fog clung like wet muslin. Beyond, a haze of incense rose from ships where priests chanted matins against the wail of oriental flutes drifting from the Ottoman line. Don Juan ordered his fleet drawn up in a broad crescent, 5 miles end to end, each division anchored on imposing Venetian galleasses bristling with heavy guns. To the left, the Venetian Proveditore Agostino Barbarigo commanded 63 galleys, tasked with hugging the shallows near the Aetolian shore. The center he kept for himself, 62 galleys under the banner of the cross, with the tall-sided Real forming the keystone. On the right, Andrea Doria led 54 Genoese, Papal, and Spanish ships, detached slightly seaward to outflank the enemy. Behind this front hovered a 40-galleon reserve under Alvaro de Bazan, ready to plug gaps or press advantage. Between every 2 war galleys, Don Juan sprinkled frigates stocked with incendiary bolts and swivel pieces, betting mobility would prove as lethal as weight. Sailors extinguished cooking fires. Surgeons laid out bone saws. The beat of drums rolled across turquoise swells, summoning each man to his appointed terror. Across the watery divide, Ali Pasha answered measure with measure. He arrayed 220 galleys in 3 squadrons, his own flagship Sultana adorned with silken sails bearing verses from the Quran in letters of gold. On his right, Pertev Pasha's Anatolian mariners angled toward the exposed flank of Barbarigo. On his left, Uluç Ali's corsairs overlapped Doria by a good 2 miles, hoping to envelope or draw him off station. Janissaries squatted atop sacks of sand, match ropes smoldering. Archers dipped arrowheads into tar. Muezzins intoned the takbir until the entire line thrummed with Allahu Akbar. High on the poop, Ali Pasha unfurled a vast green standard studded with 3 crescents and 99 names of Allah, signaling no quarter. Upon that arc of sea, quiet expectation tightened into lethal intent. The opening salvo belonged not to human lung or oar, but to iron. At precisely 700 yards, the 6 Venetian galleasses dropped anchor, swung broadsides perpendicular, and unleashed a storm of molten lead hitherto unknown on Mediterranean waters. Each galleass carried 30 heavy guns, culverins, perriers, falconets, double-tiered behind embrasures. Their first volley shredded Ottoman outriders into kindling. Rowers screamed as splinters scythed torsos. Some galleys slewed in confusion, oars snapping like frost-cracked twigs. The Sultan's cannon, mounted forward only, could not reply in kind without breaking formation. Ali ordered full speed, hoping to dash past the Leviathans before they reloaded. His van clawed water, closing the gap in minutes. Musketry crackled, arrows arced. The shrill of zurna pipes rose above roar of guns. On the league's left, Barbarigo angled his oars to deny Pertev from hugging the coast, forcing a collision bow to bow. The Venetians' flagship, Fiducia, grappled with Pertev's galley in a frenzy of axes and hooked poles. A Turkish sharpshooter, perched in the fighting top, skewered Barbarigo's eye with a composite shaft. The admiral ripped the arrow free, but bled out, issuing orders. Yet his subordinate commanders fought with redoubled fury, boarding 3 Ottoman vessels in swift succession. Greek oarsmen, freed from chains by exploding bolts courtesy of Spanish Marines, snatched up cutlasses and turned on former masters, adding chaos to carnage. Pertev himself, wounded thrice, withdrew toward Lepanto, his wing in tatters and the shallows littered with drifting hulks. The center erupted into a melee worthy of Homer. Real and Sultana rammed prow to prow, iron beaks grinding until both ships locked like rutting bulls. Don Juan, clad in blue velvet over chain, leapt to the forecastle, waving a crucifix-topped pike. 200 Spanish arquebusiers unleashed point-blank volleys into the Sultana's packed bows. Janissaries answered with firepots and scimitars, their shouts a cataract of fury. Across shifting gangplanks slippery with brains and tar, men fought for inches. Ali Pasha, splendid in brocade and jeweled turban, urged reinforcements with a scimitar whose blade glimmered like liquid moonlight even in daylight glare. 3 times the Ottomans surged onto the Real's deck. 3 times Christian countercharges hurled them back. When a Turkish cannon from an adjacent galley punched a hole below waterline, Spanish carpenters leapt barefoot into bilge swill, hammering planks as the battle raged overhead. Life or death balanced on tarred oak. Meanwhile, on the right, Doria faced his own trial. Ever cautious, the Genoese magnate steered wide to outmaneuver Uluç Ali's corsairs, inadvertently opening a gap between his division and Don Juan's center. Uluç seized the chance, slashing behind Doria's stern to smash into the exposed flank of the Christian center. The flagship of the Knights of Malta, Capitana, suddenly found itself ringed by 7 Ottoman galleys. Boarding nets flew. Maltese broadswords flashed. Yet numbers told, and smoke from burning pitch blinded defenders. The Grand Cross at her masthead toppled amid triumphant Ottoman cries. Uluç ordered the banner of the Prophet raised over the captured prize, certain he could unravel the League line from within. Doria, furious at realizing his miscalculation, wheeled hard starboard, racing to plug the breach, even as contrary winds bit his sails and slowed the pivot. Grape shot from Genoese bow guns swept the corsair decks, but the delay cost blood. Back at the heart of the struggle, pivotal drama unfolded. Don Juan, seeing Ottoman flags surge anew on his right, resolved to end the duel with Ali Pasha then and there. He ordered his bodyguard of tercio veterans to form a wedge. Bucklers locked, pikes leveled, they stormed the enemy quarterdeck amid smoke and shattered planking. Ali Pasha met them blade to blade, felling 2 Spaniards before a musket ball smashed his forehead, splattering brains upon kneeling subalterns. The Ottoman banner dipped. A deafening cheer rent the sky as Don Juan's personal page seized the green standard and hoisted the Pope's blue flag in its place. Across the line, Turkish morale shuddered. Some captains fought on, but others hesitated, eyes darting toward Uluç for direction. The corsair, undaunted, lashed his contested prizes to his own hull and tried to drag them seaward, away from Doria's oncoming rescue. But Álvaro de Bazan's reserve bore down like an avalanche, 25 fresh galleys smashing into Uluç's flanks. 2 exploded under raking fire from arquebuses loaded with special 3-ball cartridges. Another capsized when its powder magazine caught a stray spark. Realizing the tide had turned, Uluç cut cables, swung east, and escaped with 30 galleys still under oar. An impressive salvage, but less than a quarter of the Ottoman fleet. By early afternoon, most battle noise had subsided into the isolated crack of muskets and the soft groan of burning timbers. Smoke lay on the gulf like funeral gauze. Gulls circled hungrily over crimson slicks, where corpses of Janissary and Spanish Marine alike drifted amid splintered oars. Of roughly 230 Ottoman galleys, more than 130 were sunk, burned, or captured. Another 40 were too mangled to tow. 30,000 Muslim sailors and soldiers perished or were taken. 12,000 Christian galley slaves burst their chains and fell weeping before crucifixes raised on splintered masts. The Holy League lost around 30 galleys and 8,000 men. Fearsome but bearable casualties compared with the annihilation visited upon their foe. As sunset tinted the Ionian Sea blood red, surviving commanders gathered on the Real's deck. Musicians struck the Te Deum. Cardinal Marco Antonio Colonna distributed indulgences promised by Pius V, and a messenger set off for Rome carrying news that Christendom had won its greatest naval victory since Actium. Yet triumph carried sober lessons. The League's unity dissolved almost as swiftly as it had formed. Venice sought separate peace with the Sultan 3 years later, trading Cyprus for trade concessions. Don Juan yearned to press advantage, but died of fever in Flanders in 1578. Spain drained treasure convoys to fight Dutch rebels. The papacy turned eyes north toward encroaching Protestant crowns. Within a decade, the Ottomans rebuilt a new fleet at astonishing speed, proving their empire resilient, if not invincible. Still, Lepanto mattered beyond immediate strategy. It shattered the aura of Ottoman naval infallibility, preserved the Western Mediterranean from further Muslim expansion, and inspired a flowering of Catholic confidence expressed in art, poetry, and Baroque magnificence. Miguel de Cervantes, maimed that day aboard the Marquesa, would immortalize the greatest occasion witnessed in centuries, even as he penned Don Quixote, reminding Europe that bravery often walks with folly. Modern scholars debate logistics and leadership, ballistics and faith. But the men who rode, fired, and bled at Lepanto recalled something simpler: a water world suddenly convulsed by flame. Veterans spoke of Greek fire jars smashing against hull planks, igniting trails of naphtha that kissed skyward in stuttering blue pillars. Of ore banks thumping out heartbeats until enemy rams splintered bow timbers. Of the sickly sweet stink when musket balls churned holds full of captive rowers too chained to flee. They remembered how prayer beads rattled against sword hilts, how the moan of wounded horses, kept aboard to bear landing parties, mingled with the crackle of burning spars. Some never forgot the sight of Ali Pasha's severed head hoisted on a pike, a final grisly totem to seal Christian victory, while others spoke only of the hush that descended when gun smoke drifted away and the sea lay mirror still, strewn with drifting corpses that turned slowly beneath a crimson sunset, faces toward whatever heaven their lives had earned. Today, the Gulf of Patras is plied by ferries and windsurfers who seldom pause to recall that beneath their hulls lie bones of empires. But if one anchors late in the afternoon, when Ionian light melts mountains to mauve shadows and lowers an ear to the gentle slap of wave against keel, perhaps an echo will carry up from weed-softened ribs of shattered galleys. The clang of cymbals, the thunder of culverins, the chanting of monks, the ululation of muezzins, an almighty chorus that once decided the fate of a sea and the imagination of half a world. Lepanto endures not simply as day the galleys blazed, but as proof that in the crucible of human conflict, courage and conviction can kindle acts whose sparks fly centuries before extinguishing.